Thank you. What better topic after cannabis than snacks? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Beanfield Snacks, but first of all, I do want to go back and tell you a little bit about Zico and how Zico really was a social impact experiment from the beginning. I didn't do as good a job as I would have liked in telling that story, and part of that because I was holding on for my dear life as this thing exploded. But really, when I was exploring the idea of starting Zico with my wife back in 2003, when we were living in El Salvador, we started with a couple big ideas in mind. One was, first of all, could we do something that was impactful for us? I was in the packaging industry, the paper industry. Wasn't that exciting? I wanted to do something aligned with my values, something I really believed in. Second of all, we were we've always been active, we've always been athletic, and I had given up drinking Gatorade and other crap years ago and felt like, wow, there's an opportunity here to help contribute in some small way to everyone living slightly healthier, more active lives, right? The other big impact for us was we had spent a good deal of our career and lives in Latin America. I started as a Peace Corps volunteer in Central America. My wife did a lot of work in the public health arena. And we recognized that although there's needs all over the world, the developing world in particular had a huge need at the time and still does for jobs. And realizing that coconuts were grown in 85 poor countries around the world, we thought, how amazing if we could launch an industry that had an impact and created jobs in these countries, brought investment into these countries. And I'll never forget my wife challenging me one day, or recognizing one day, her background's public health, and saying, I could never imagine a bigger public health coup in my life than helping the biggest beverage company in the world sell something healthy. And that's why we started Zico, with that vision in mind. And we accomplished some of that. Bob mentioned it's an $8 billion global category, blows my mind. Billions of dollars have been invested in third world countries to support the coconut water industry, millions of jobs created. We're pretty excited about that and feel great about that. Yet, I look at that and I see some gaps and some things that didn't thrill me. And as I started to move on and think about what I want to do the rest of my life, I thought more and more about that. One was, we're shipping water across the world. The carbon footprint on this thing ain't exactly good, right? We all have that challenge in some way or the other in the beverage industry. I didn't feel great about that. It was what it was. No other way to get it out of there than ship it around. But that was a challenge for me. I also came to understand that all the impact we make was amazing. But what happens with capital? Capital accumulates up. It maybe trickles down a little bit. So yeah, we helped billions of dollars be invested and brought into third world countries. Most of that wound up in wealthy families that were controlling the countries, controlling the production, controlling the industries, investors, myself, right? So it's just a recognition that there's some aspects of the system I didn't always love. And so I started to think about ways that I might be able to do different things in different ways and ultimately support a bigger social impact missions, but more importantly, think about alignment. How do you get the right alignment? And that's one thing I realized, and I'm thinking anybody that started a business has realized, the importance of getting alignment top to bottom. Your vision, your employees, your strategy, your people, your customers, your vendors. When you can get everybody aligned, it's amazing what can happen on the business front. What if we could do that on the social front and build that alignment in from the beginning? So I started out with that as a sort of premise, but I also thought I was going to take a little break for a while. So this was supposed to be me on a beach or in some Caribbean sea for a couple years. And I did take a little time off after I started Zico and wrote a book called High Hanging Fruit about this adventure and everything I'd gone through, my wife had gone through, and tried to sort of understand what that all meant. And in many ways, I thought, I'm going to be done for a while, But then as happens in life sometime, in the midst of writing my book, I read a book by this guy, Father Greg Boyle, called Tattoos on the Heart. Amazing book. Has anybody read it? Oh, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. Does anybody know Homeboy Industries before today? Okay, great. Yeah, in LA, they have a pretty good following. So, read the book, and I felt like, oh my God, first of all, I'm never going to be a real writer. This guy's an amazing writer. Second of all, what little I thought about social impact. Here's a guy that dedicated his life to it. Now, he's a Jesuit priest, you know. You got to kind of think about other people to be a Jesuit priest, I think. But this guy moved into some of the worst neighborhoods in LA in the 1980s, tried to figure out how it could be helpful, and realized what was happening with gang violence, what was happening with gang recruitment, the challenge young men and women were facing, especially young men, coming out of gangs, coming out of jail, and getting themselves reintegrated into life. And it struck me, and I wanted to try to figure out how to be helpful. At the same time, though, you know, the way I tend to operate is I said to my wife, look, let's think about where we're going to make an impact. And let's think about all over the world and look at all these different issues. And let's look at health and wellness and education and environment, and let's go through and evaluate. And my wife said, yeah, let's just go visit Father Greg. So we took a trek down to see Father Greg in Boyle Heights, and we brought my parents and Moore's parents. My wife happened to be in town at the same time. Took the tour around the facility, and heard a talk from a guy named Stevie, who just had an amazing story. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but to hear the way this guy grew up and the challenges he faced, and friends of his and siblings dying in the streets, and realizing what limited opportunities he had. No wonder he wound up in jail. No wonder he wound up in trouble. And the only way he got out of that was through Homeboy. And I remember thinking there, listening to Stevie talk and thinking of this phrase. I forget where it comes from, but it's basically, there but for the grace of God go I. You know? This guy, like, what's that different about us, man? Had I grown up in that situation, I had my own troubles. I grew up in a good family in a good suburb of Pittsburgh, and I was in trouble all the time. Did plenty of drugs, got in trouble for that, got into some breaking and entering, got in the stupid shit kids do, right? But I got a second chance. I had an opportunity. I had a community to support me. Stevie did not. So I walked out of that meeting and decided I wanted to try to help in some way. And the reality is the work Homeboy does is just amazing, and their statistics are incredible. Generally speaking, in this country, we have a 70% recidivism rate. The probability somebody gets out of jail and goes back is 70%. In the Homeboy program, it's 30%. 30%. And they do it at half the cost that it takes the general system. So not only are they changing lives, they're doing it efficiently and effectively. So I wanted to be involved. Now, one of the services they offer is tattoo removal. I don't know how to remove tattoos. They do a lot of counseling with people and a lot of coaching with people. That's not my area of expertise. So I talked to Tom Basso, the president, the CEO, and Father Greg, and asked, hey, how do you think I could help? What are some of the issues you're facing? And they said two things. Money, we need money. To do these services is a constant, fundraising battle, and we need to help create jobs for some of our graduates. So I took on that challenge. I'm going to try to do something with what I know how to do, start businesses. So I dove in and started to think about, from the beginning, what business could we align with Homeboy, and how can we think about alignment top to bottom, about mission and vision, brand and product, get founders or investors, the whole team involved around it, customers, partners, as well as the personal relationships. And the first thing that occurred to me is start a beverage business. So I hired a flavor development house. I got people involved. I was all ready to go. And this is the mock-ups I found in my computer from, 4 years ago or so, how we were going to merchandise it. It was going to be a line of aguas frescas, the Mexican style, but sort of modern, healthier, stuff like that. And it just got stuck. And I think I got probably scared. I think I remembered how idiotic it is to start a beverage business in this industry. And I got distracted. I started making investments. So I invested on a personal basis in not just in this space, but Runa, Suja, Koya, Core. I didn't even put it on the chart. I invested in a cannabis space, a company called Privateer. That's the parent company of Tilray that it just IPO'd. So I've had some, but I put up only the good ones on here. There's 30 others that have died, right? And then I also started a venture fund. I got hooked up with some guys I really love, and we started Power Plant Ventures and got distracted on that way. Meanwhile, the damn Homeboy beverages are on my shelf, gnawing a hole in me. But it just wasn't right. And I've learned at times to just let things, emerge. And so, but there was one company I invested in that was pretty interesting, Beanfield Snacks. I was an angel investor pretty soon after they launched. They did a great job, amazing founders and family, got it up to a certain scale, and they got stuck, like a lot of companies do, at about 7-8 million in revenue, and they couldn't get it any further. So they were out trying to raise money, and it was a difficult time. And I remember getting a call from the founder that said, Mark, we're stuck, We have an offer on the table from a guy that's in our industry that has a reputation for being brutal with companies. And he said, I'm afraid I'm going to lose the company. It's going to lose its core. So I went to my partners at PowerPlant and said, I know it's a big conflict of interest, but I want to get involved in this company. As a fund, we're not going to get involved in a turnaround company. And so I told him I want to get involved in the avoid the conflict of interest. I won't make any money on it. I'd worked with a partner that's a turnaround expert, and we dove in to try to buy control of the company. In the end, PowerPlant wound up taking an interest and wound up putting up the majority of the capital in the first round. So we bought the company. And the goal was, from the beginning, to figure out how to make this work with Homeboy and how to get alignment from top to bottom. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we got aligned on that. But first of all, I want to tell you about why this Beanfields was interesting from the beginning. Turns out, snacks are a big category. I think snacks are maybe 5 to 10 years behind beverage. The adoption curve we're seeing in beverage, I think, is going to come in snacks. The consumer switch from traditional, sodas to healthier beverages, I think is going to happen in snacks. And beans are very interesting. Grown right here in the U.S., potential to support farmers in the U.S., super important for the soil, their nitrogen fixation versus pulling nutrients out of the soil. Beans are very water efficient as well, and they're delicious. So the big idea was, wait a second, why do we only have corn and potato? Who died and made them king? Why don't let's have beans deserve their proper place in the food system. But most importantly, they just taste good. And whoever dropped off our samples today is going to get an earful, because this isn't the best tasting one. This is the plain one. The flavored ones are amazing. So I thought, hey, here's a big business opportunity. How can we integrate Homeboy into this? So what we did is come up with a very unique structure, and I'll give a lot of credit to my partner in this deal, Bruce Friedman, who's a structuring genius, could have cared less initially about the social impact side, but was willing to go along with it. And we created a structure where, out of the gate, first of all, the founders had to be supportive of it. They loved the mission, and they took a lower valuation they could have got somewhere else by dealing with us. And leveraging that lower valuation, not floor level, but less than it would have been, we created a group of investors and offered them this challenge. We'd love to have you invest in this company. You have to pledge at least 10% of your gain to Homeboy, and ideally more, up to 30%. But we put in a package that it's an attractive deal. Good valuation, great upside, and put a team together that's going to be involved and run it. I committed to be chairman of the board, probably an active CEO for a period of time, put our fund behind it, and the investors agreed. We had to kiss a lot of frogs. We probably had, I probably talked to 100 investors to get 10, right? But that's not atypical, right? Anyone that's raised money knows that's what you have to do anyway. Even our fund, looking at it on pure economic basis, said it makes sense. We ran the numbers, looked at the upside, looked at the calculus, and said that makes sense. We also committed to give 1% of net sales to support Homeboy. And we committed to do our best to try to create jobs for some of the graduates. That one's been a challenge. We've hired one person I'll tell you about later, but I hoped that would be further along by now. It's not, but we're in the process of doing that. So ultimately, what's been interesting as well, though, and what it reminds me is the importance of getting the strategy right. All this is worthless if the business doesn't work. So what we set out from the beginning is set a strong strategy for Beanfields that basically is elevate the bean. Elevate the bean. The bean deserves its proper place in the food system. And we think we can convince young millennial and Gen Z consumers to get rid of Doritos, substitute for Beanfields. And there's also, with all due respect to any of the other entrepreneurs, kale chips, come on. We think we can bring more people into the category with a great tasting bean chip. So that's what excited us out of the gate. And this is Miguel. So this is our first Homeboy hire. Miguel has a very, very fascinating story and very challenging life that he had growing up, originally out of El Salvador. But he went through Homeboy program. They bring about 250 people in a year into their program, and everybody gets a second chance. But if you're in the program, you got to stick with the program, and it is rigorous. So Miguel was a graduate from that program, but with a record this long, tatted up from head to toes, how many job opportunities do you think he had? Not a lot. There's a couple amazing companies in LA that are making the effort to hire some of their graduates. We vetted a couple, put them through an interviewing process, and made very clear to Miguel, this is a job. You got to win it. You got to earn it every day. He's been with us for about a year. Works in the warehouse, does a lot of e-fulfillment for us, a lot of other kind of warehousing activity. He is a full-time employee and has equity in the company just like anybody else. I'd hope we'd have 10 by now. We have Miguel, and we're making sure that works, and then we'll build from there. So what I thought I'd do with just a couple minutes left is I want to try to offer some thoughts on what I've seen, what we've seen. We look at 500 companies a deal across the space, across the industry for power plant. We absolutely are a money-making organization. We want to bet on entrepreneurs that are going to build the next generation of great brands, but we always want to try to build in this social impact. And so let me tell you a few thoughts on how you as entrepreneurs, you as investors, board members, even consumers can think about ways to better align social impact in the bottom line. Start with why. Anybody know the book? Amazing book. Encourage you to read it or at least watch the TED Talk on it, Simon Sinek. This is, it's fundamental, right? To really understand why are you doing this, both your business, but also the social impact. I hear people talk about it all the time. It's thrown around like it's e-com. Well, you got to be an e-com. You got to have a social impact mission. I don't believe that, right? Why are you doing this? And what I love is when you get an entrepreneur like Ethan Brown doing Beyond Meat and really talk to this guy. Why is he doing what he's doing? I would argue. Now, Beyond Meat doesn't necessarily have one core social impact component to their model. That business at $1 billion, I'm going to get the numbers wrong. I have it in my data somewhere, but it's approximately, I think, 500 billion liters of water a year they'll save. They can pull billions of pounds of CO2 out of the atmosphere by helping consumers switch from meat to plant-based. That's impact. It's massive impact. And when you talk to Ethan, as well as the animal rights side of it, and that's what Ethan is most passionate about. So I'd ask you to look inside yourselves. It's got to matter to you. It's got to matter to your team. It's got to be something that really is a reason to get up in the morning and commit yourself to this, because it's double hard if you're going to try to do it with social impact. Second, ask who before what, how, and what. I'm amazed. I've only realized this in the last couple of years, talking to entrepreneurs and working with so many different companies. It's obvious, but I'd forgotten it. It's all about people. That's it. Full stop. And when I hear entrepreneurs start with this idea of how they're going to do something, what they're going to do, all the plans, I'm immediately saying they don't get it. They don't get it. It's the entrepreneurs that talk about, look, I'm not sure how to figure this out, but Bob knows. And Bob is part of my team, or I'm going to get Bob on part of my team because, he's the one that's going to figure it out, right? I'm not sure about this thing, but let you talk to Corey. Corey, he knows what's up on this, right? And when you think that way, in the social impact world, even more so, right? None of us could do what Father Greg, Tom Vaso, and the whole team at Homeboy do. So let's partner with them, right? We don't have to recreate these things. Deliver business results. It drives me nuts when entrepreneurs, I find that there's sort of three buckets. You've got the missionaries that want to save the world. Everything's nice. I started this because my grandmother died of cancer, and I want to solve cancer. I want to solve this because these poor little animals. Then you got the mercenaries. Screw them. I'm going to make $1 billion, right? I like the visionaries that merge the two, right? But I can tell you, when somebody comes into my office and leads off with immediately impact, my first question is, do they have a clue what it takes to build a business? And I'll tell you what's interesting, one of my biggest frustrations is, you know how much time I spend, or this new CEO spends, or anybody on the Beanfields team spends with Homeboy today? 0. Yeah, we go to a run, we support them, because it's irrelevant if the business doesn't scale. In a year or two, that'll be different. We learned this at Rebel as well. Rebel has a very tight relationship with Not for Sale. For the first 2 years, the mantra was build the brand, build the brand, build the brand. Now we got it to a point at a certain scale where we can take advantage of that. Success equals experimentation. Try things out. We don't know what's going to work in this business yet. We're going to keep trying and failing until we figure it out. Elevate your story and mission. I'm out of time, but I'm just going to be quickly. I was speaking to a very large global food service provider and just helping them think a little bit differently about their college program. So this was their mission out of the gate. We're all about great food. We're passionate about great service. Oh, wow. Yay, me too. You think Gen Z wants to go work there or be served by that? Just even thinking about elevating to providing nutrition to help develop young bodies and minds is an elevation. But what about thinking bigger about this? That company is really fueling students today so tomorrow they can change the world. Now, that's a marketing spin perhaps, but it also going to be a mantra that cascades through the organization where people start thinking about how am I going to achieve this and how does social impact really align with the business. And finally, leverage the best and brightest. The thing I love about this industry is the energy, the youth, the excitement, the innovation. That's where we're going to learn. I spend all the time I can with Gen Z entrepreneurs. They're geared this way. They're thinking about social impact out of the gate. And so I'm always picking up ideas from them. So I encourage you to spend time with them and let's learn about ways to get alignment from them. So that's it. What I'd say is, look, I'd love to hear any stories that are attempts to do this with alignment. We're going to make public at some point. I can just get around to getting organized around it. Everything we did on Beanfields, legal structure, equity structure, employee structure, just so we can see it and share. It's one of the things that annoys me in this industry. It's like we don't share enough of these ideas. And so I welcome to hear from any of you. Anyone know more about this, I'm happy to share it. Thank you.